that my Redeemer liveth. A book hasn't been written about her. A book in the Bible hasn't been named after her. And yet, in the Bible, she occurs more than the name of the person that is mentioned. The person I'm going to speak about this morning is Naomi. And we find her story related in the book of Ruth. And Ruth was the daughter-in-law. So let's see what we can learn from the person Naomi today. If we turn to Ruth chapter 1 and we look at the first verse, it says, "Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they came into the country of Moab and continued there." So we know by the introduction that this family came from Bethlehem and they went to Moab. And they belonged to the tribe of Judah, this husband and wife. They left Bethlehem. Why? Because there was a famine in the land. This wasn't something strange. Just remember Abraham, when he lived also, there was a famine and he had to go to Egypt. I was surprised that even with his son Isaac, when there was a famine in the land, he had to go to Egypt. And we of course know the story of Jacob, when he had to send his sons to Egypt because there was a famine in their area. So they had needed to travel to these foreign countries, countries that did not serve God the way they did, because food was found there. When you look at the name Bethlehem, what does Bethlehem mean? The name Bethlehem means the place of bread, the place of food. And yet in this place of food, there was no food. So they traveled to Moab. Moab was an area and a place that was not respected by the people from Bethlehem. In fact, the Moabites were so detested as a people that it was almost impossible for the people of Bethlehem to ever really interact with them. We can turn to Deuteronomy chapter 23. Deuteronomy chapter 23 gives us very clearly 3 sets of people that could eventually be entrenched or joined again to the people of Bethlehem. Let's look at what chapter 23 verse 7 to 8 says. "Thou shalt not abhor an Edomite, for he is thy brother. Thou shalt not abhor an Egyptian, because thou wast a stranger in his land. The children that are begotten of them shall enter into the congregation of the Lord in their 3rd generation." Meaning that the people from Edom and the people from Egypt, notice they say, the Bible says, Moses writes that the Edomites should be regarded as your brother, and the Egyptians should be regarded because they were with you at the time when you went through your trouble, and they provided for you and they allowed you into their country. So it says here in the Bible that in the third generation, meaning your great-grandchildren could have association with the people from Egypt and with the people from Edom. But let's look what they say about the Moabites. This we find also in chapter 23, verse 3. It says, an Ammonite or a Moabite shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord, even to their 10th generation. Shall they not enter into the congregation of the Lord forever? Because if it's 10 generations down, you are never going to live long enough to see your 10th generation. You can still see your 3rd generation, am I right? But the 10th generation, even like I read this one lady who's living to the age of 121, that would most probably be, at least if we stretch it, maybe 5 generations, or 6, but not 10. This is how much the great distance between the people from Bethlehem and the people from Moab. And the Bible gives us a reason. It says here, verse 4, because they met you not with bread and with water in the way when you came out of Egypt, and because they hired against the Balaam, the son of Beor, of Pethor, of Mesopotamia, to curse thee. We know the story of Balaam and the cursing with the donkey. But the people from Moab, they were abhorred simply because they didn't get their food when the people from Israel passed through from Egypt. They didn't provide them with food. But not only that, if you go back into the history in the Bible in Leviticus, it tells you where the Moabite nation originated from. And I know I'm just giving a bit of background so that we can see where does this family from Bethlehem fit into this Moabite group. The Moabites came about when there was that strange relationship between Lot and his daughters. Remember, Lot's wife turned into a pillar of salt, and then the angels had said to them, flee into the mountains before you can go to the other cities of refuge. And we also know that occurred when Lot's daughter said, we are going to die without having children. And their father was drunk, and he had relations with them, and children were born from that. And these children that was born was the original Moabites. So you can imagine they were abhorred as a people because of how they started, and they were also abhorred because they did not share. So the people of Moab was a detested people, but yet that was the only place where there was food. And so Elimelech and Naomi moved from Bethlehem, their safe haven, and they went to Moab. Let's look what verse 3 tells us. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. So in this strange country, she became a widow because her husband died, and she did not have the privilege of burying him among her people or among the people of God, because she was in a strange land. But that wasn't all that it says here. Verse 4, and they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth, and they dwelt there about 10 years. After Elimelech died, the 2 sons got married to women from Moab. Now it's almost natural. if you live in a certain country and there's nobody else around, and you come to marriageable age, that you're going to marry somebody from that country. I don't know why Naomi in that time didn't go back to Bethlehem. I don't know, because when I look at the story, it says after Elimelech died, the sons married these two girls from Moab, but not only did they do that, they lived there for 10 years. Do you think this famine lasted that long? I don't know. But you know, sometimes we get comfortable with where we are. And so, I don't think it was difficult for her to go back, because this is all the information that we get from the Bible, and we now went to some historical background. But the fact is, they got married to these young ladies. They lived there for 10 years, but they had no children. So, later in the story, let's see what it says with verse 5. And Mahlon and Chilion died also, both of them. And the woman was left of her 2 sons and her husband. So everything that she had brought from Bethlehem, all the people that she came from Bethlehem with, passed away. Her husband and her 2 sons. And she was there alone in this strange foreign country. But she had 2 daughters-in-law. And they were from Moab. But you know, there must have been something about Naomi that must have attracted these girls, because it says in our story, in our Bible story, that she heard that things were good in Bethlehem again. She heard that the famine had passed. And so it was that she decided, it says in verse 6, then she arose with the daughters-in-law, that she might return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab how the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread. And then she went and she decided, I'm going back. When she started going back, her 2 daughters-in-law went with her, because she was now their mother. And as she traveled back, she said to both of them, she said to them in verse 8, and Naomi said unto her 2 daughters-in-law, go, return each to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you, as ye have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant you that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voice, and they wept. And they said to her, surely we will return with thee unto thy people. She told her daughters-in-law, go back to your own people. Find a husband there. Live with your family. But the girls answered and said, no. You have become part of we are part of your family. We will go with you. And then it says, she went a little further, and they said unto her, no, surely we will return with thee unto thy people. And Naomi said, turn again, my daughters. Why will he go with me? Are there yet any more sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? You see, the culture of that day was, if it was that your husband died, then your husband's brother had to marry you. Remember, this was portrayed also with Judah's son, when the elder son died, then the second son had to marry the wife. And then when he died, when it came to the third son, Judah kept him away and didn't want him to marry. And we know that story where it fits into the Bible too, and into how God provides and handles us. And this story of the boys and women mother-in-law. But Ruth clave to her. Orpah said goodbye to her mother-in-law. And Orpah went back. But Ruth then says those words that was probably immortalized in some of our experiences, where Ruth says to her mother-in-law, she says, entreat thee not to leave me, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God, my God. Where thou diest, I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death should part me from the two of us from each other. So Ruth is saying to her, I am going to cling to you. Where you go, I'm going to go. Where you live, I am going to live. Your God, the true God, is going to be my God. And one day, when you die, I will die. But she does say, qualified by making provision for if she dies before her mother-in-law. But she is going to be buried where the mother-in-law is. There must have been something about Naomi that her daughters-in-law could see, and that they could embrace and not want to leave her. Although, Orpah turned back, but Ruth did not. Through Naomi's mind might have come the thought of, how do I explain things when I go back? Because remember, those were not the days that, like we are connected today, where you can know exactly when something happens that very day or within that week. And she went back to Bethlehem with a heavy heart. Why would I say with a heavy heart? Because when she came to the entrance of Bethlehem, when she came to the city gate, the women of the area came, and they were waiting almost with anticipation for her to arrive. And when she eventually came, then the woman, as they welcomed her, she said to them, do not, in verse 20, verse 19, and so the two went until they came to Bethlehem. And it came to pass when they were come to Bethlehem that all the city was moved with them, and they said, is this Naomi? And she said unto them, call me not Naomi, call me Mara. The name Naomi means pleasant. The name Mara, bitter. She said, for the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord brought me home again empty. Why then will you call me Naomi, seeing the Lord hath testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me? Does God afflict us? No. But He allows affliction to come. And there's a reason. If we really sit and we look back, then we will still say, Lord, whatever you have done has happened well. Remember, Naomi went, and she went in order to live. That's why they went to Moab. Because if they had to stay in Bethlehem, they were going to die. There was no food. And yet, in the very area that she went to live, death visited her 3 times. And that is why she came back with this kind of experience of everything has been stacked against me. And this is how she greeted the people when she came back. And when we come to chapter 2, it tells us of how they settled and how Ruth went to glean in the field of Boaz. And as Ruth was, I'm just giving to give continuity. As Ruth was gleaning in the field, Boaz noticed her, and he said to the workers, he asked who she was, and they said that she had come back from Moab with her mother-in-law Naomi. And Boaz was aware, if you really look at it, as to who she was. And he said, give her extra, don't let her work so hard, give her, see that you put extra wheat down, so it's easy for her to pick up. And to go, and when she went up, and in fact, Boaz even approached her and he said to her, if you want any water, you're at liberty to come and drink over here with my workers. If it's time for you to rest and it's too hot, you can sit over here under the trees where they are. And when she went home, she told Naomi what happened. And then Naomi thought, wow, Boaz is actually my kinsman redeemer. But she did not know how Boaz would accept Ruth, because Ruth was from Moab. And I like this one quote that I received that I believe God must have just put in my way as I was reading through things. It says here, if there is one thing in the Bible that should be clear to us, it is that it takes place in a cultural context. The one thing we have to understand, that we perceive God, and we perceive the church, and we perceive each other through the culture that we come from. Because we were raised and we were established as people having a certain culture. It says here, whatever the eternal truths that God is teaching us through His Word, the Bible, they come to us through people who live and function in their own culture. A culture that at times may seem very strange to us because we think differently. So it was a difficult thing for Boaz to just look at this lady, and he was aware that he is a kinsman. Kinsman being he is near in relation to her because of her marriage to Naomi's son. But he doesn't do anything because Boaz is also aware of one or two things. And in chapter 3, Naomi decides to step in. In fact, in chapter 2, verse 20, let's look at the words in chapter 2, verse 20. When this is when Ruth comes back and she says, I gleaned in the field of Boaz. And when Naomi realizes who he is, and Naomi said unto her daughter-in-law, Blessed be he of the Lord, who hath not left off his kindness to the living and the dead. And Naomi said unto her, The man is near of kin unto us, one of our next kinsmen. Remember, when Naomi entered Bethlehem and she saw the woman, what did she say? I am afflicted. The Lord has not dealt well with me. I am sad and I am almost embittered because my son and my sons and my husband passed away. In fact, she said, I went out full and I came back empty. But here in chapter 2, her tongue and her attitude is changing because of what Boaz had already done. Not Boaz, how God had provided for her. Because remember when she came back to no work. She came back to no food. Although there was food in Bethlehem, it wasn't just for you to pick up and eat. You still needed to earn it. And that is why when she saw the goodness of God through the mercy and grace of Boaz, she could now change her words. And she could now say in verse 20, Blessed be he of the Lord, who hath not left of his kindness to the living and to the dead. Now she could see God's kindness coming through again. The way he was kind then is the way he is kind now. And then she put things into place. And I like the kind of mother-in-law she becomes. Remember in chapter 2, Boaz is aware, and Naomi is aware, that he is the next of kin, because that is how things happened in those days. But here Naomi decides she's going to help her along. So she says to Ruth, it's time for the threshing. It is time when the harvest is going to happen, and there is a festival that happens around us. So she says to her in chapter 3, then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said unto her, my daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee, that it may be well with thee? And now is not Boaz of our kindred, with whose maidens thou wast? Behold, he winnoweth barley tonight in the threshing field. And then she puts her plan in action. She says to her daughter-in-law, wash thyself, anoint thee, and put thy raiment upon thee, and get thee down to the floor, and make not thyself known unto the man, until he shall have done eating and drinking. So she says to her daughter-in-law, have a bath, smell good, anoint your body, put on good clothes, and be at the right place at the right time. And in our story it says, Boaz, when he wakes up during the night, he is aware that somebody is at his feet, and he asks who it is, and she makes herself known. And Boaz says to her, cover yourself, and tomorrow morning, before the sun comes up, go back. I will see what I can do tomorrow morning, because there is another kinsman who is nearer than me. He says to her, you see, I would like to actually have you as my wife, in plain English. But I cannot do it because there is somebody that is closer to the family than me. And I first need to sort that out. So he still gives her the dignity. So she goes back the next morning and she tells this to Naomi, and they wait, and sure enough, the next morning Boaz goes to the place where the men meet, and he meets with this relative, and he says to the relative, you have the privilege, and they've got a nice kind of custom the way they do it. You have the privilege of buying that land. But as soon as you offer to buy it, what must also happen? You must also take the daughter-in-law. You can't only have the land. You must also marry the daughter-in-law so that the lineage, the heritage of that family can continue. So that their name doesn't just get obliterated by the way. And there's never an Elimelech and Chilion and Marlon. The family name should still continue. But this gentleman, the Bible says, he thought he's got his own family, and when I did a bit of background study, it says, if it is that he married her and she had a child, then the child was entitled to his property also. Not only to Elimelech's property, but also to his. And so he decided, no, it's not going to be good for me. And he said, no, I will not be able to enter this alliance. And so it was that, as the custom was, they did things by the shoe. Today we sign or we shake on it. And so it was, he took off his shoe as a sign that he had given up his privilege of actually buying that land. And I can imagine Boaz must have been delighted, because it left the field open. And Boaz could now do what he felt was right. And what we know is right when we look back, because it's always good for us, because we see it from this side of the Bible, am I right? But Boaz didn't know. And so it was that Ruth and he got married, and this happened in chapter 4. But I said, this story isn't about Ruth and about Boaz. It was more about Naomi. As it started in Ruth chapter 1, about Naomi, it ends as Boaz and Ruth got married in chapter 4. And we are going to verse 14. Okay. It says, so Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife. And when he went in unto her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bare a son. So they got married, and they had a son. But this is where Ruth comes. Naomi comes in again. It says, and the woman of the village said unto Naomi, blessed be the Lord, which hath not left thee this day without a kinsman, that his name may be famous in Israel. And he shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life, and a nourisher of thy old age. For thy daughter-in-law, which loveth thee, which is better to thee than 7 sons, hath borne him. And Naomi took the child and laid it in her bosom, and became nurse unto it. And the women her neighbors gave it a name, saying, this is a son born to Naomi. And they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of King David. So, when this son was born, what did everybody acknowledge that he is a son born to who? To Naomi. Not even to Ruth. It's a son that is born to Naomi. And it says they didn't even give Ruth or Boaz the privilege of naming him. It says they, the women of the village, called his name Obed, who is the father of David, and who eventually became the father of Jesus. So that girl from Moab, eventually, when we go to Matthew chapter 1, it tells us where she fitted in the story. And when we look at Naomi, what are some of the lessons that we could learn from Naomi and her experience? Only 4 lessons, and you can find much more, and I deduced from her story. It says, we have to take responsibility for our own situation. Remember, she said, the Lord did me, and the Lord hasn't dealt well with me. She needed to take her own responsibility. Remember, they moved to Moab. When her husband died, she allowed her sons to marry these daughters from Moab. So although to her it seemed affliction had come from God, sometimes some of the things that happens to us, we have to step back and see it happened for a reason, and God allowed it to happen because of whatever circumstances. Another thing that we learn from her is that you have to look beyond your problems. She had to look beyond, and eventually, I've just got Ruth. She had to look beyond that this is a problem. And she had to see how Ruth could, I won't say be of benefit to her, but how Ruth could be a blessing to her. And was Ruth a blessing? Very definitely. And so it was that the other lesson is that we have to look beyond the problems that we are facing right now. And are some of us facing problems? Very definitely. As long as there is this world in existence, there's going to be a devil. Until Jesus, our great Redeemer, comes to eradicate all of sin and all of the wrongs. The 4th thing is, she had to learn to be grateful. She had to learn to thank God for the blessings that she even had. Because not only was Ruth a blessing, but Boaz was a blessing. She was able to eat. She was able to restore herself to the position that she was. where she owned land, yes, she was the owner of things, but where she could live a good life again. And the fourth lesson that we could learn from her was that she needed to wait on God. Sometimes we want to run before, am I right? But God says, wait on me. Things will come right if you do everything according to the Bible, according to what I've revealed to you, so it's no use going through life and wanting to be bitter. Lift your head, because your redemption is drawing nigh. Although Boaz served as Ruth's kinsman redeemer, at the end of it all, God is our kinsman redeemer. God is the one to redeem us. God, and if you look at the Bible says about kinsman redeemer all the time in the book of Ruth. What does it mean to redeem? I looked it up in the dictionary. It says to compensate for any bad aspect in your life. To redeem, you can take on that kind of attitude. It's a compensation. Or it can be to fulfill or carry out something. But the one we love the best is to redeem, is to gain or to regain what was yours. God has redeemed us. God has done so much for us that when we go through our new experience, the brand new one that we're stepping out into, we will be able to say, God is still a good God because of what you've done. Amen. Amen.
They will rise now.